From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. We have some breaking news. Exit polls suggest that Ireland has voted to repeal its abortion ban. Voters turned out in large numbers to have their say on whether to change the country's constitution, which outlaws abortion by giving equal rights to the unborn. An exit poll conducted for the Irish Times by Ipsom MRBI suggests that the country voted by a landslide to legalize abortion. We start in Barbados where, we're in Barbados where the Barbados Labour Party, Mia Mottley, has been sworn in as the country's 8th Prime Minister. By law, the Prime Minister must be sworn in alongside her Attorney General. The rest of the cabinet will take their oaths of office over the weekend, since Prime Minister Mottley hopes to open Parliament as early as next week. And even though she declared Friday a half-day off for the country, she said she's getting right to work, getting briefings on the economy.
I hope that over the course of the next week to be able to set the tone. We are deeply humbled by the mandate which the people of Barbados have given us, as I indicated last night. We are conscious that what lies before this nation is a set of programs that we will have to undertake first to be able to stabilize the country. We refer to those in our manifesto as mission-critical ideas.
And Laura Prada was at the swearing-in ceremony in Bridgetown.
Hello, nice to greet you from Barbados. Right now we are at the house of the Governor General House, where Mia Mottley, the new Prime Minister of the country, has sworn at the charge for the next 5 years. She said during a press conference after this moment where she swore to be the Prime Minister, she was saying to the press that she is very conscious of the moment they are living and they must work very serious to keep the promise they made to the people and to what they exposed on the manifesto they presented as their work for these new 5 years. The local television and the media here in Barbados are talking about the 30 seats that the BLP, the Barbados Labour Party, won in the parliament, and that this is the first time a woman occupies the post of Prime Minister. Also, this is the first time in Barbadian election history that the parliament is fully occupied by only one party. This is history that is taking place here in Barbados, and Barbadians are conscious of that. This last day of election, yesterday, tomorrow, 24th of May, was a really long journey because it started at 6 a.m. with the opening of the polling centers and finished today in the first hours of this 25th of May. We'll continue here in Barbados sharing with you what comes.
And congratulations are coming in for Mottley. St. Lucia's Prime Minister Alan Chastanet was one of the first to send best wishes. He was with her on the campaign trail. She also received congratulations from Andrew Holness of Jamaica and the first female Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Kamala Persad-Bissessar. Now, while many look to Miss Mottley's political resume and her previous time in government as a strength, political analyst Derek Ramsamuj urges caution.
Yes, you would find a number of senior politicians in their respective countries would have developed a political network in the region. But I want to basically warn the Barbados population. Someone may be a very effective cabinet minister, but when it comes to leading your country, it's a completely different ballgame. And therefore, some of the decisions she's going to have to implement may cause political stress for her own party supporters. But you must recognize that now you're Prime Minister of Barbados, and your interest is that of Barbados, as opposed to your political interest of the party.
Colombians go to the polls on Sunday. Germain Vargas Lleras and Sergio Fajardo are making a last-ditch plea as they trail right-wing frontrunner Ivan Duque and former guerrilla Gustavo Petro. Now, the 56-year-old Germain Vargas Lleras has a long political history of holding important offices in Colombia, including serving as vice president under Juan Manuel Santos from 2014 to 2017. Though he says his government would not be a continuation of the Santos government. Fajardo, who's a 61-year-old former governor of the state of Antioquia, is credited for the reduction in violent crime and improving the economy of the city of Medellin. In Venezuela, President Nicolas Maduro has held a series of high-level meetings at the Miraflores Plaza, including a meeting with the U.S. Republican Senator Bob Corker. To take a deeper look at Maduro's meetings and what has been happening in Venezuela, we're being joined live by our correspondent, Ian Bruce, who's in Caracas. Hello, Ian. Tell us a bit more about Maduro's meeting with that Republican senator.
Yes, Sonia. Well, it does seem to be quite a significant meeting. You'll remember that this comes just 4 days after U.S. President Donald Trump imposed fresh financial sanctions on Venezuela, just 3 days after Venezuela announced it was expelling the U.S. chargé d'affaires and his deputy from Caracas. And President Bob Corker is not just any senator, he's the chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, so he's one of the most powerful figures in the Washington foreign policy establishment. That said, we still don't have a lot of detail about that meeting. The communications minister, Jorge Rodriguez, came out after the meeting and said this was an extremely important meeting for Venezuela. He said this was part of President Nicolas Maduro's call for to open a dialogue with all sectors at home and abroad following his victory in last weekend's election. But we'll have to wait for more details to find out exactly what they were talking about. I should add, of course, that Bob Corker, as well as being a senior Republican, he's seen as a conservative, very certainly, but a pragmatic conservative. And he's, in fact, been very critical of President Trump on occasions. And just in the last few days, he's been fiercely criticizing President Trump's trade tariffs in the auto sector in relation to China.
Now, really quickly, Ian, of course, there's a lot of interesting stuff happening in Venezuela with the visit of Mr. Corker, but what else has been happening in Venezuela?
Pretty much in the same line, Soini, really. I mean, this call for dialogue, we've seen various things going on today. Maduro had meetings with the Latin American Development Bank. He had a meeting with the papal nuncio, the ambassador of the Vatican. All part of this attempt to open up a dialogue, political and economic, to try and strengthen the economy, which he promised before. The finance minister, interestingly, has been meeting with ambassadors of a whole series of European Union countries, trying to secure and boost European companies' investment in Venezuela as part of that attempt to address the economy. Ironically, that comes just as the European Union said it's considering further sanctions against Venezuelan officials. So again, we have this sort of rather double act going on, and we'll have to see how that plays out.
Thank you so much for that update and wrap, Ian Bruce. That's our Ian Bruce talking to us from Caracas, and we're going to take a short break. So join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. Tension is rising on Brazil's highways. President Michel Temer has ordered security forces to clear roads blocked by striking truck drivers. The truckers have been on strike for 5 days in protest against the increase in oil prices. The strike has left the country virtually paralyzed, with food shortages in several states. The truck drivers have rejected proposals from Petrobras to freeze prices by 10% for 15 days, and they are calling on the government to implement lasting measures to stop the price increases.
We're going to implement a security plan to overcome the serious effects of the shortage caused by this paralyzation. I can announce that I have mobilized the federal security forces to unblock the streets.
And despite the government's threats to use force, truck drivers are determined to carry on the strike. The ABCAM union, which represents 700,000 truckers, said their plan is to continue the strike and the roadblocks.
We are independent truck drivers, and those that spoke yesterday announcing an agreement said silly things. The trade unions have made bad proposals. We're independent. They made up the proposals for themselves. They aren't ours.
We have been devalued by the government. They say Brazil wouldn't stop if the lorries stop. We have proved that is not the case. The class that can bring the country to a standstill is that of the truckers.
And drivers from other sectors have joined the trucker strike to also protest the rise in fuel prices. Brazil's financial capital, Sao Paulo, is at risk of shortages, and the mayor, Bruno Covas, has declared a state of emergency. Our correspondent, Ignacio Limas, has more.
We are at May 23rd Avenue in Sao Paulo, where a convoy of school buses has blocked the traffic. They are joining the truck drivers in protesting against the increase of fuel prices. Almost all gas stations in Sao Paulo are suffering from shortage, and long queues are forming at those that still have some fuel. Some flights have been cancelled in airports such as Sao Paulo and Brazil. All across the country, the strike has resulted in shortages. The strike was begun by truck drivers, but has now been joined by other sectors. They are all affected by the increase of gas prices due to the partial privatization of Petrobras, cuts to refineries, and the dependence on imported oil from countries such as the United States. The Brazilian population is standing up and urging the government to solve this. Meanwhile, as you can see, access to Sao Paulo is restricted.
And we thank Ignacio Limas for that report. Now we head to Cuba, where another of the 3 survivors from last Friday's plane crash has died. This leaves just one of the 113 victims alive. A second black box from the aircraft has been found, which could mean a very important step in the ongoing investigation to find out the cause of the accident. Our correspondent in Havana, Alian Fernandez, tells us more.
Last night, 41 years old Emily Sanchez, one of the 3 survivors that was in a critical condition in Calixto Garcia Hospital in the capital, lost her fight for life. She had severe injuries and burns. Doctors had already said she was unlikely to survive. Now, there is just one survivor from last week's plane crash here in Cuba. That survivor is 19 years old, Maylen Diaz, who is in critical condition. Also, related to this plane crash, a second black box flight recorder has appeared, according to the Cuban Civil Aviation Institute. This could be a huge step in order to find out the cause of the accident. During the last few hours, the commission created by the Cuban government to look into the accident has been working both in the lab and in the field, as new pieces from the aircraft are found, which could provide more information on what happened. The Institute of Forensic Medicine has reported that 74 victims have been identified, 64 Cuban citizens and 10 foreigners. One Mexican citizen is still to be identified, and in order to do so, more information has been requested from her family to identify her as soon as possible.
Now, a journalist has been found dead in northern Mexico, bringing the number of journalists murdered in Mexico in 2018 to 5. Alicia Diaz-Gonzalez died after being violently attacked in her home in Monterrey. Investigators have ruled out robbery as an option, as a search of her home showed no valuables were missing. Some 44 journalists have been murdered during President Enrique Peña Nieto's 6-year term. And as the number of journalists killed in Mexico grows, a group of media professionals are making a documentary to tell the story of their murdered colleagues, their struggles, and the government's failure to tackle the crimes.
During the presidency of Enrique Peña Nieto, Mexico has been identified by international organizations as one of the most dangerous countries for journalists. In the documentary No se mata la verdad, the story of some of the victims of this violence is told as a way to convey conditions under which Mexican journalists live.
Many people from all across the country are committed to informing the population through their work, and despite the harsh conditions in which we find ourselves, they are still here with their investigations to show society the truth about power.
The producers of Mirar Morir, a movie on the disappearance of the 43 students in Ayotzinapa, works to expose yet another case of violence, oppression, and intimidation in Mexico.
We already had a first cut before they killed Javier, and 1 month before, they killed Miroslava. It was very difficult to make the decision to resume the work of Javier and put it into the documentary.
More than 10 journalists were murdered during the production of the documentary, including Javier Valdez, one of the main voices in the film. Through testimonies, the authors show the importance of journalism currently in Mexico.
It is necessary to exhibit what is happening. My father said that the only tool we have as citizens is to inform, to let people know what the officials are doing, what they're stealing, the injustice that they commit, because otherwise things are not going to change.
43 journalists have been murdered during the 6 years in office served by President Enrique Peña Nieto, most of them working on issues concerning corruption and relationships between the government officials and organized crime. All these cases remain yet unsolved.
2 men and a woman have died after a cinema collapsed in Tucumán, Argentina. Emergency workers and police tried to help the victims who were buried under the rubble. Locals report hearing an explosion at the time of the collapse, but firefighters say they're still investigating the possible causes of the incident. The collapsed building was more than 90 years old, and according to local media, it was being restored. And still in Argentina, social organizations have gathered to protest against Mauricio Macri's intention to sign an agreement with the International Monetary Fund. The protest takes place on the anniversary of Argentine independence in 1810. Our correspondent, Egado Esteban, brings us the story.
On this May 25th, when Argentina commemorates the May Revolution, the first successful revolution in the South American independence process, an event has been planned to protest against the agreement that Mauricio Macri's government wants to sign with the International Monetary Fund. "Our homeland is at risk," is the slogan of this event, organized by over 40 social organizations. Among them, trade unions, social movements, cultural representatives, as well as owners of small businesses, to show Mauricio Macri that they reject any agreement with the IMF.
Also in Argentina, protesters have gathered outside the Argentine Football Association headquarters in Buenos Aires to pressure the national team into boycotting its pre-World Cup warm-up with Israel. They urged the national soccer team to cancel the match following the killings of hundreds of Palestinians in Gaza by the Israeli army during the last few weeks. The match is due to be played in Jerusalem on June 9th. And in Guatemala, there's a new law to help women develop new businesses and play a bigger role in the economy.
Dozens of women from social, indigenous, and campesino organizations gather in the outside of the Congress building to present a project called the Law of Economic Development for Women. A group of politicians are promoting this law to develop the economy for these communities.
Now we have more than 1,400,000 women out of work. We hope that little by little this fund will grow.
The bill is aimed at indigenous women, campesinos, and single mothers. It would begin with funding of $41 million. According to this legislator, one of the objectives is to offer funding and technical assistance so women can develop new businesses.
The plan is to create marketing change so that they will help women sell their products. At the moment, we have a serious distortion in terms of privileges for large economic groups that haven't reached a few but exploited the majority.
According to official data, 75% of employed people are in the informal sector. Women represent a high percentage of this number. The new law aims to help this sector of the population get formal jobs, and through this, generate more income and create more jobs.
We can't just sit back and talk about malnutrition and poverty. We have to work for our country because it gives us a lot of natural resources, and we are proud of that. We can be an example to our children and for the young people in our family. We have to teach our children the value of work.
It is now up to the Congress to approve the bill of economic development for women. This would be the first project from the state addressed specifically to women.
Subtropical storm Alberto is the first named storm of the 2018 Atlantic hurricane season. Alberto formed in the Western Caribbean Sea. It is expected to head north through the Gulf of Mexico, bringing the threat of flash flooding, strong winds and coastal flooding to the southeastern United States. After 2017's deadly hurricane season, experts believe 2018 should be much calmer. We're going to take the second break of our newscast now, but join us again after another look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting.
¿Por qué le tiró a la muchacha? ¡La mataste! ¡Mató a la muchacha! ¡Ahí está la muchacha! ¡Está muerta! Dice, son tasers. Balazo en la cabeza, como chingones de tasers.
They're going to be arrested, okay? I'm just telling you.
No estoy diciendo nada, simplemente me da coraje porque dispararon a una chava.
Welcome back. The former Hollywood film producer Harvey Weinstein has appeared in New York on charges of sexual misconduct. Over 70 women have accused the co-founder of the Miramax studio and the Weinstein Company with sexual abuse. The allegations that gave rise to the Me Too movement, in which hundreds of women publicly accused powerful men in business, government and entertainment of abuse. Weinstein's lawyer said he was likely to plead not guilty.
My job is not to defend behavior. My job is to defend something that is criminal behavior. Bad behavior. Mr. Weinstein did not invent the casting couch in Hollywood, and to the extent that there is bad behavior in that industry, that is not what this is about. Bad behavior is not on trial in this case. It's only if you intentionally committed a criminal act, and Mr. Weinstein vigorously denies.
After abruptly calling off the talks with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, U.S. President Donald Trump has now told reporters that the meeting could still happen. On Thursday, the White House had announced that as a result of a trail of broken promises from North Korea, the U.S. called off the June 12th summit. Kim responded to Trump's cancellation by saying that North Korea was still willing to talk with the United States at any time in any form. Meanwhile, in North Korea, 3 controlled explosions rocked a nuclear testing facility at Punggye-ri after the country vowed to destroy a nuclear test site. The members of the international media were there to film the blast, but no international observers or weapons inspectors were present. The detonation came just hours before President Donald Trump canceled his Singapore summit with Kim Jong-un. 2 Kosovo doctors were convicted for a second time on Thursday of running an organ trafficking ring that performed illegal kidney transplants at a clinic near the capital, Pristina. The defendants recruited at least 7 donors from Turkey and the former Soviet Union by advertising on the internet and operated on them with the view towards selling their organs. The director of the Medicus Clinic, urologist Lufti Devishny, was sentenced to 7.5 years. The anesthesiologist, Sukol Hajdij Iwaz, was sentenced to 1 year. The Spanish rapper Valtonyc is on the run after being sentenced to prison for performing anti-government songs. The 24-year-old, whose real name is Joseph Miquel Arenas Beltran, was due to begin a 3.5-year prison sentence for producing lyrics that was said to glorify terrorism and insult the Spanish monarchy. The musicians appealed to the Supreme Court on the grounds that he was protected by his right to freedom of expression was rejected. And that has brought us to the end of this news brief, but for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesyourtv.net/English. You should also join us on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sonia Gray. Thank you so much for watching.
Our actions have an impact